Walt Disney, an emblem of America, sought to evoke hope and nurture the child within every individual through his characters, films, and theme parks. In doing so, he established one of the most prosperous and influential corporations globally, with an estimated value of $130 billion. However, prior to his success, he was destitute and had only $40 to his name. Born in Chicago in 1901, Walt was raised on a farm in Marceline by his mother Flora, a teacher, and his father Elias, a farmer and entrepreneur. Despite Elias' numerous business ventures, he encountered repeated failures, forcing him to resort to carpentry. As the family grew to 7, including Walt's 4 siblings Herb, Ray, Roy, Ruth, Elias' financial struggles mounted, leading him to become cold and even abusive towards his children. The situation became unbearable for Herb and Ray, who ran away, marking the beginning of a series of misfortunes for the Disney family. Elias contracted typhoid and pneumonia, while Roy shouldered the responsibility of tending to the farm. However, the work was too demanding for a 16-year-old. At Flora's insistence, Elias sold the farm and moved the family to Kansas City, where Ruth was bedridden with the measles. To keep his sister amused, Walt drew a series of animated figures, his first foray into animation and a rare moment of play amid his otherwise monotonous existence. Unlike most children his age who played outside, Walt had little leisure time, with his days consumed by work. After the move to Kansas City, Elias bought a newspaper business and coerced Walt into making deliveries before dawn, without compensation. Consequently, Walt took up odd jobs such as selling newspapers, delivering pharmacy prescriptions, and sweeping floors. His teachers grew concerned, noticing that he frequently dozed off in class and was easily distracted, more interested in drawing cartoons and reading stories of adventure and success. Entertainment captivated Walt, particularly after his classmate Walt Pfeiffer introduced him to the world of motion pictures and vaudeville shows. Walt began secretly attending theaters with Pfeiffer, concealing it from his father, who considered entertainment frivolous. Eventually, however, like his older brothers, Herb and Ray, Roy could no longer tolerate their father's behavior and absconded. Walt was thrust into more responsibilities after losing his 3 brothers. At only 10 years old, he had to take on more work and assist in renovating his family's home. His older brother Elias would often lose his patience with Walt and would hit him with whatever was nearby, including a hammer handle and a wooden board. Despite his mother's pleas for Elias to be gentle with Walt, the abuse continued. One frigid evening, while delivering newspapers for his father's business, Walt accidentally kicked a piece of ice and a horseshoe nail went through his boot, injuring his toe. No one stopped to help him until much later, and the doctor warned him that he had nothing to give him for the pain. While recovering from his injury, Walt reflected on his future and realized that he was most passionate about drawing. It was his solace during tough times and brought joy to those around him. He decided to become a cartoonist, not knowing that this would eventually lead to building one of the world's largest companies. After 7 years in Kansas City, the Disney family returned to Chicago when Elias's newspaper business failed. He invested all his savings, along with some of Walt's money, into a jelly factory. Walt was pressured into working there as a handyman and night guard to contribute to the family income. However, he was paid very little and quit to find better-paying jobs. When World War I entered its 4th year, Walt lied about his age to work for the Red Cross as an ambulance driver at just 16 years old. During his first assignment, an influenza epidemic broke out and Walt caught the virus. He was advised to go to the hospital, but he heeded the driver's warning and returned home, where his mother nursed him and his sister through the illness. Although she contracted the virus herself, she continued to care for both individuals until they had fully recovered. Walt learned that 2 of his close friends had been admitted to the hospital after contracting the virus, and tragically, both of them passed away the next day. Despite being spared from the same fate, Walt continued his work for the Red Cross and was eventually sent to France. Following the conclusion of the war, Walt returned home but refused to return to high school. His father, Elias, respected his decision and offered him a position at the factory for a reasonable salary. However, Walt expressed that he did not desire that type of job and shared his aspiration to become an artist. Elias questioned how Walt would make a living as an artist, and Walt admitted that he did not know. One thing was certain after his time in France: he needed to carve out his own path. Despite his father's wishes, Walt packed his belongings and journeyed to Kansas City, where his brother Roy and childhood friends were located. Walt was confident that he could secure a position as a cartoonist for the Kansas City Star. After arriving and getting settled, Walt went to the Kansas City Star's office, only to be told by an HR representative that there were no open positions for a cartoonist. To get his foot in the door, Walt devised a new plan and noticed an opening for a copy boy. However, the HR employee suggested that Walt find a job in transportation instead because of his previous work as an ambulance driver. Walt then attempted to secure a position with the Kansas City Journal, but once again, he was informed that there were no openings for a cartoonist. Despite his difficulties, Walt refused to give up and confided in Roy. Roy advised Walt to pursue a more practical career, but Walt remained steadfast in his desire to become a cartoonist. Roy's colleague recommended that Walt apply to an art studio that was seeking an apprentice, and Walt eagerly applied. The studio owners were impressed with Walt's passion and offered him the position. At the studio, Walt met Ub Iwerks, who was also a high school dropout and had worked various odd jobs. The two became fast friends and realized that their skills complemented each other well. Walt was a visionary, and Ub was quick and adaptable. After both of them were laid off after the holidays, they remained optimistic and decided to start their own business together called Disney Iwerks. Unfortunately, the company only lasted for 1 month. The Kansas City Film Ad Company was seeking an artist and offered Walt the position, but he preferred to devote his time to Disney Iwerks with Ub. Despite Walt's reservations, Ub urged him to accept the opportunity, believing that he could manage the business alone during Walt's absence. However, Ub was not confident enough to generate sales, and the business soon failed. After the failure of Disney Iwerks, Walt convinced his boss to hire Ub. The setback of Disney Iwerks ultimately resulted in a positive outcome. While working, Walt was exposed to animation using cutout figures of humans and animals. Intrigued, he befriended a cameraman and taught himself how to operate the camera. Walt later realized that hand-drawn figures created more realistic animations than cutouts. After discovering that studios in New York were creating cartoons using hand-drawn figures, Walt borrowed books from the library to learn more about the technique. Impressed with his new skill, the Kansas City Film Ad Company asked Walt to create animations for their clients. Eager to experiment beyond the given material, Walt borrowed the company's camera and began creating his own cartoons. After completing 300 feet of film, Walt presented his cartoons to the manager of the Newman Theater Company, who was impressed and agreed to feature them. The cartoons were so popular that Walt quit his job and started Laugh-O-Gram Films. Walt raised enough money to rent an office and hired animators to create a series of fairy tale cartoons. Although they completed all 6 cartoons, the production company went bankrupt and Walt was left homeless. He sold his camera and moved to Hollywood to become a director. However, he was rejected by every studio he applied to. After borrowing money from his brother, Roy suggested that Walt start making cartoons again. Despite feeling discouraged, Walt eventually restarted his cartoon production and became successful in Hollywood, where there were no other cartoonists. Thanks for watching this first part of the history of Disney. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss out on our latest business stories. We have a lot of exciting content coming up, so stay tuned and be sure to check out our other videos on the channel. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.